everything that happened to me up to this point could not have been laid out in any more of a way. We ended up getting Chief Garcia as our chief, somebody who cares about the troops, somebody who ended up looking at a problem, said, I need something created. So everybody sat down, penciled something in, and came up with the wellness unit. He ended up having it implemented. Once it was implemented, he went on ahead and ended up putting out the 30-day inpatient allowance for administrative leave. So I was walking on a razor's edge for the last 2 years. My drinking had just exponentially gotten worse and worse and worse, and there is a line that once you cross it, you can't uncross it into alcoholism. For the entire time that I've been here, my main purpose that I've enjoyed is going out, helping the citizens of Dallas as a guardian, as a protector, doing what I can, then going home. It was the Dallas Police Department, not this individual. In my final days at rehab, I had gone on ahead and realized what had been given to me as a second chance. I ended up telling myself and telling God that if there is something I can do to help out another officer on this department in some way, shape, or form, or some other alcoholic in the dark across the country in some way, shape, or form, I was going to do it.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
If you build it, he will come. That line became famous from the iconic baseball movie, Field of Dreams. However, others will know it from the Bible, where God answers Noah's question of where he would get all the animals to fill his ark after it was built. Sometimes you need to take a leap of faith. A leap in what you build will indeed succeed. You have to sway the skeptical eye that gazes at what you created so that it may be embraced and attract those who need it most. This is a story of the Dallas Police Department building something unique, something special, something that can extend careers, heal families, and save their lives. This is truly a tale of a life being saved, a promising young career set back on track. In 2022, Chief Eddie Garcia saw a need for change, a need to build something unique to make a difference for the future of the Dallas Police Department. If you build it, he will come. It was built, and he has come, and today he has come to the ATO stage to tell his story of survival and gratitude. I'm Joe King. I'm sitting with Danny Canetti and Kent Wolverton. The winds of Dallas PD have changed over the past year. First, a unit was built to put not only a focus on officer wellness, but also create a safe haven for officers to trust and know it's okay to reach out, to have hard conversations and make tough decisions that could change their life or save their life. We're in the business of saving lives and improving the quality of life for so many in the city, but we're sometimes not the best at improving our own life and our own quality of life. Today's courageous guest proved it can be done, and we hope this story inspires others and they know that this olive branch that is extended is strong and divine intervention is very real. Gordon, thank you so much for coming on with us, and I want you to finish this story off.
Thank you.
Gordon, we're just going to start from the top. We're going to get into the journey that got you to the doors of the wellness unit, but I want the listener to know where you grew up and how you got to DPD, and I want the listener to see the snowball cumulative effect that this profession can take on a human being to get to a point that you had to come to the wellness unit to begin with. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, a little place called Midway City. In 2000, I ended up moving over to Flower Mound, Texas. After that, I spent there all the way through elementary, middle, high school. When I ended up graduating high school, I ended up going out to University of Texas Arlington for a few years, changed my major, left to go knock out my basics at community college, is just in the area.
How did law enforcement get on your radar?
It ended up getting on my radar because I switched from kinesiology, sports science, over to criminal justice. And I was originally going ahead and get my associates in criminal justice. And I was taking some night classes, and probably one of the most brutally honest recruiters for Dallas PD ended up coming into one of my classes.
Are you able to say who that is?
I do not remember. I wish I remember.
What do you mean by brutally honest?
It was not, there was no fluff that was given to it. It was just honest.
Wasn't Tom Popkin, was it? Yeah, sounds like Tom. Shout out, Tom.
It's hashtag Tom.
So it was incredibly honest as to what to expect, as opposed to just saying, oh, you could end up going here, get to this rank, or do this. So it got my interest piqued, so I went on ahead and I met with a recruiter down at headquarters, ended up filling out the packet, and then 6 months later, I was sitting in the academy.
You were in class 338 and graduated in 2014. Where did you go right after you graduated?
So as soon as I ended up graduating, I ended up doing my field training down over at Channel 1, the Central Division. After I finished there, I ended up bouncing around for the next several years between the bids between Central and CBD. After I ended up getting to Fourth Watch Central back in 2019, I ended up getting picked to do an enrichment program for about 8 months with the Vice unit in their uniform division. After there, I ended up getting onto Third Watch bikes down in downtown. After that, I ended up leaving because I promoted. Went back to Deep Nights CBD, where I ended up training rookies. And after that, I bidded for Northwest Third Watch. And while I was there for only about 2 months, I ended up getting selected to be a part of Chief Garcia's Place Network Investigation Unit, which focuses on violent crime.
Okay. So when you first hit the streets, not having any background in law enforcement, and what struck you the most is the excitement, the danger, both, and were you prepared for what was out there in the city of Dallas?
So what ended up striking me the most was because my primary phase was on Deep Nights. So I got to see a lot of stuff. I ended up going to hot calls multiple times a shift, not knowing what was going on because I had zero background whatsoever coming into the academy and this department. As far as being prepared, I thought the academy did a really good job on giving you some tools in the toolbox to be able to effectively make reports, make arrests, fend for yourself, essentially. But one area that I did think was a bit lacking was on the mental aspect, on dealing with what you were going to be seeing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, prior to going to the Dallas PD, had you ever been like a physical fight?
I had been in only a handful of physical fights, but just like, playground, play yard, schoolyard, just little fights, nothing major.
Never been in a foot chase?
I had not been a foot chase.
Ever
Like that's just normal things
Yeah.
that people do.
Ever-
Hey, come over here. I just want to chase you.
Have you
It's called
ever-
tag, Joe?
have you ever pulled a gun on somebody?
No,
Ever had a gun pulled on you prior to getting out?
Nope.
Okay. You ever seen a dead body?
I had not seen a dead body.
See, they can talk about things in the academy and show pictures and go through training, go through modules, but it doesn't really prepare you for what's out there and what you're going to be, exposed to.
Where they don't talk about it are the years of seeing the worst in humanity every day, and to the point where you're just almost angry when you go home, just tired of seeing crap.
Yeah, it adds up, and I want to talk about cumulative PTSD. Cumulative PTSD could be more harmful than just a traumatic PTSD from a single event, like an officer involved shooting, or gets getting shot at where you don't shoot back. Bad guy drops the gun. Everything works out fine, and you take them to jail, take them to talk to the detective, and then you go home, and that's kind of it, right? You don't really prepare for that. The ups and downs of fighting somebody, going over a fence, fighting them more, running up in the dope houses like we all did here. It doesn't, that constant adrenaline rush, that's the hypervigilant state that you have to be in. You're not ready for that. And out in the city of Dallas, you're thrown to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And this cumulative effect of the small pinpricks, it really is like death by 1,000 pinpricks. And then you have a huge event like a 7/7, right? Can you tell the listener, for one, I want to get into, there's two reasons that day is significant for you personally and professionally. Can you tell the listeners why that date is significant?
So that day's pretty significant to me because I was on my day off because I had taken the previous night because I was still on deep nights because it was my 25th birthday. I had gone out to dinner with my dad and brother. We had just gone back to his house when all of a sudden I got a phone call, and it was somebody who never calls me. And I looked at the phone, answered it, and said, "What's going on?" "Well, are you okay?" I'm like, "Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be okay?" I hadn't turned on the news at all. I turned on the TV, and I mean, it didn't matter what news channel it was right there. My dad, he's standing in the kitchen. I was standing in the living room. My dad just looked at the TV, looked at me. I looked at him, and the last thing I said to him was, "I'm sorry," and then ran out of the house. I was on the phone with my sergeant. I don't know why I was asking for permission because I was going to go anyways, saying, do you guys need help down there?" As I'm driving in my truck down the highway. He just said, "Just get here," hangs up. I managed to dive behind a SWAT Tahoe that was coming down 35. So I had a pretty much straight shot into downtown. My sergeant, he was tossing keys to any officer that was showing up to just go get in a squad car, get to the staging area or wherever. I had just recently bought my own heavy vest and helmet at the time. They weren't being issued out as far as I'm aware of. But the position I ended up getting posted up at was Market and Elm Street. And I didn't realize it as soon as I showed up, but I found out real quick when I got told to get my ass a little bit behind the wall because I realized that the shooter was right above me. I could see a shot out squad car there on Elm Street. Ended up finding out later on that was apparently where Sergeant Smith ended up going down at. And I had recently started becoming friends with him. So I'm posted up there. I ended up having like 4 other patrol officers that were behind me on that corner because if somebody could take her around, it was me because nobody else had a heavy vest. And it felt like ages that I was just standing there, just posted up on the wall with my gun up towards the window. And when SWAT ended up detonating, I mean, you could feel that blast and feel that wall shake all the way from the outside. It was about maybe 20 minutes later, myself and Officer Probesius, we ended up getting picked to go up and secure the shooter's body. And walking through the hallways and then the stairwell with all the different lettering and signing that he ended up putting on the wall with his own blood, all the way to that room. And we were just told to stand there and secure the body for hours and hours on end. I mean, because it was in the summertime, it started getting warm, and then the AC and everything was blown out of that entire building. You could start just slowly smelling the blood and the iron just getting into the air. And then just that lingering smell of almonds, which I ended up coming to find out is what compact explosive smells like after it's been detonated. Again, I don't remember exactly how many hours. I think it was 5 or 6 hours that we were just posted in that small little room.
So what time is this?
The sun is already come up for about 2 hours.
And so you've been up for over 24 hours?
Easily. And then ended up having some day shift guys come up to relieve us, and then we went home. I lost my faith in God that day.
Why?
Because I ended up losing my faith in God that day because Michael Smith was a good man, family man. And then to find out that Brent Thompson was also killed. And I got to meet him several times because he worked over at the Weston transfer station. So I remembered looking up because I went back to my dad's place. And I just looked up and I went, either you're not real or you're not the God I believe in. Because why could this end up happening to two guys that I knew that were really good? Much less the fact that I had gone to meet Michael Smith because he worked off duty at the Baptist church that was near my apartment that I lived at that time. And he was starting to get me to go back to church again. So I just turned my back on God that day.
You said on that day you lost your faith in God.
Yeah.
So obviously that is going on with you spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving us an idea on how you're viewing yourself in this world from that standpoint. What about how you view yourself in this world as an officer, your relationship with the community? Were you even thinking about those things? Or was it just more the focus on the internal struggle spiritually and with yourself? I mean, was that also occupying your mind, like you as an officer going back to work, the type of situations you put in with the way the climate was back then, the political climate, the climate with our communities?
So my viewpoint on that in terms of going to work and the community was the exact same. I didn't lose faith in humanity or the community. I mean, my very first day was in November of 2014, and it was when the protesters ended up taking over I-30. So, I mean, my very first night was dealing with protests. I've never minded them whatsoever. So in terms of it happening during a protest, people calling to defund the police, I've never had any real thought of, oh, this again, or blaming them for anything in that aspect. Really, it just came down to spiritually. I blamed God for allowing that to happen to those individual people. I mean, it might have been one of those things where I was just like, well, why not me instead? I mean, I'm a single guy, no kids, nothing like that going on. And these guys were all family men of God. I mean, I was a little bit of a lapsed Catholic just because I wasn't really going to church as much, because I would just be like, I just want to go home and go to sleep as soon as I get home. So I just kind of stopped going that way. But these guys were still doing everything every single time, every day. And so that
strong examples of men.
Yeah. And so that's why I ended up I only lost my my faith in God that day, not the community or anything else.
Yeah, so I think a majority of officers were going through a lot of stress with relationships in their communities, with their own families, with their identity in this police world and how they're viewed. And it sounds like that was less of a stressor for you. It was more the internal, spiritual, and the relationships that you had with these other two officers who were killed.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even get to know them on a super personal level, because I mean, it was more like when I would talk to Thompson, it would just be while we're at work or in between something, and then Sergeant Smith, it was when I ended up showing up to the church that he was working off duty at up in North Dallas, that I would end up just getting to talk with him for about, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes at a time. And then, I mean, I got to know him enough where I was like, this is a good, solid dude. And then when I got to hear more and more about him and Thompson from the funerals, and then just people knew him for years, that ended up just hurting even more on why them.
Did you go to the funerals?
I ended up going to Michael Smith's. I kind of went on ahead and started my downhill spiral. I feel like I ended up betraying the department, because I ended up choosing, instead of going to the other ones, that I would just sit at home with a bottle. Thompson's, I remember I had like half my Class A's on, and then I just sat down on the couch in my apartment with a bottle and just started down that path after that incident.
Had you drank before this?
I had drank a little bit in the social atmosphere, and then.
But I guess did you drink before as a coping mechanism with certain stress?
Coping, I had started a little bit, not too much. One of the incidences that ended up, I actually, the first incident that I ended up having that I started coping with was Paul Miltenberger. He was a young college guy who ended up getting killed on East 55 East Mockingbird by a guy that was just speeding down, and he died on Easter Sunday. That just because of the significance of the date, and then the sounds of the people that loved him that had come up with him, just the ear-piercing screams. I mean, it was one of those where it became really hard to sleep, so I ended up throwing back like 2 or 3 just to kind of help quiet my head.
And how long did this last? So if you were using this as a coping mechanism, how long would such an episode last for you to deal with something? Or did it really start and it never ended?
It never stopped.
So we've mentioned it a couple of times, coping mechanism, and how we use alcohol as a coping mechanism, but explain really, what are you trying to cope through? Is it you're trying to just stop thinking about what you're thinking about? Is it to help you get to sleep? Like,
numb yourself?
What was it?
When it all ended up boiling down to in the end was before I ended up crossing the line, was I I was having trouble sleeping just because it was deep night, so my body was starting to reject the hours. So I would end up having like a few to just like knock me out. Then it became trying to just silence my head and the screams that I'm hearing, because I mean, I loved going to the hot calls. I mean, being the one to be able to show up, save the day, help somebody. So I was drinking to just silence the screams that I just kept hearing while I was by myself, and then to try and not have the flashbacks coming back. And then after July 7th, I started drinking to also try and just phase myself out, because the silence in downtown that ended up happening afterwards was the most eerie, terrifying sound I had heard. So even in like the dead silence, that ends up bringing me right back to that day. So really, it just became just compounded with everything. Like
The smell of explosives, which you may have never smelled before.
Yeah,
the sight you saw in the crime scene.
Still have issues being able to eat almonds just because of the smell of it. Like, just ends up bringing me right back.
I never actually noticed the almonds before, but now that you mention it, it's basically right there. Yeah.
You mentioned you were walking on razors in your day-to-day life. Can you explain that?
So I was walking on a razor's edge for the last 2 years. My drinking had just exponentially gotten worse and worse and worse. And there is a line that once you cross it, you can't uncross it into alcoholism. What I ended up doing was I ended up figuring out through trial and error with a breathalyzer was, from the moment I ended up getting home, to minimize the hangover and to be triple zeroed out, I ended up I would have to end up drinking my entire fifth of bourbon within 3.5 to 4 hours of getting home. And that's if I get home like pretty much a half hour after my shift ends. By the time I end up finishing that, then I could end up going to bed. When I would wake up in the morning, I'd end up popping 3 Excedrin and then taking a scoop of pre-workout, which with 300 milligrams of caffeine, just on an empty stomach right there. So I could end up bypassing the hangover or alleviate it a little bit, and then also seem a lot more functional. And then before I walked out the door, I'd end up having 300 more milligrams thrown into a shaker bottle, which I would end up drinking that before I end up getting to work with another bang to be able to pop open by the time detail started. So roughly my morning started off with about 900 milligrams of caffeine. And the razor's edge was the fact that I had to have myself planned out in advance.
To be a functioning alcoholic as much of the percentage of the days you could.
Well, not just that, because I was also, DWIs, unlawful carries, all things like that end up going hand in hand while you're drinking copious amounts. So what I ended up doing was I knew it was only going to be a fifth every single time for 2 years, up until I ended up getting help. On my way home, there's a liquor store that I'll just pull off at, walk in, get my fifth, go home, start drinking it. And then by the time that's done, because it would take me about that time, never quicker, luckily. So I'd never end up going, okay, I need to go out and drive and get some more. When my weekend would hit, I would have 2 or 3 handles of liquor. And I would end up getting 3 just because in case it was Sunday or I ran out, I wouldn't have to, because it was average of 2 handles over my weekend. But if I ended up needing more or anything else like that, I never had to go drive. And those days, a couple of times I ended up going a little deep into a third because, wake up in the morning, I have a hangover, I don't have to take caffeine because I'm not going to work. So I can just go on ahead and get hair of the dog and then just continue on throughout the rest of my day like that. But all it would have taken was just a moment where I needed that drink. It at a certain point, it stopped becoming a luxury. It became a necessity. And if I didn't end up having that, or if it was Sunday or shit, well, they still serve. I could still buy beer or something like that. If I were to have gotten in my car, I would have definitely, even if I didn't even feel drunk because of the amount I was drinking, my .08 felt like nothing. But I would have still been over the limit if I got into a car. If I screwed up on my timing, or if for some reason I drank more when I ended up coming home, and I wasn't able to check myself, I could end up showing to work while intoxicated. There was just so many different things that could have just completely ruined my entire career. Because I would have lost everything I had. Because getting popped in Texas for a DWI, and once you're charged, you lose your license for 10 years. When you get for a misdemeanor B, A above, you end up losing it for life. So I would have lost my license, which means I would have lost my job, which means I would have then not been able to pay the mortgage or any other aspect of theirs. So then I would have been in default of multiple different things, and I would have gone from what I had worked so hard and so many years to grind for, and it would have all been thrown in the trash. So when I was talking about walking on a razor's edge, all it would have taken was just one slip up in any way, shape, or form or aspect, and my entire house of cards would have fallen down immediately.
Who knew you were going through this?
There wasn't a single person that knew.
So none of your family?
No one.
Are you living with anyone at the time?
I had been living with my fiance for 4 months before I ended up making a call for help.
What about coworkers? Are they recognizing anything?
Nobody ended up recognizing anything, because I would just end up lying. If sometimes I would end up showing up and I would end up having a little bit of tremors in my hand from withdrawals. If somebody ended up noticing that, or I show up and I'm a little hungover still because the caffeine hasn't kicked in yet and I look tired, all I'd end up having to say is, I didn't sleep well at night. Or, I'm a little shaky. I ended up having a lot of caffeine, which that part was absolutely true. But the reason behind the shake was not because of caffeine whatsoever. So I had an excuse and a lie that for just about anything and everything. And it's just so easily accepted, because in our job, we sleep like shit and we drink a ton of caffeine. So as long as I had those two under my belt, I could end up explaining away anything to any coworker and nobody batted an eye.
Once you got with your fiance and y'all moved in together, how much more difficult was it for you to maintain this schedule? And did you start seeing in yourself that it was that bad and you wanted to change?
So I had started recognizing that it was bad before she ended up moving in. It's hard to explain, like the mental aspect behind alcoholism, but there were several nights where I was done drinking. I wanted to go to bed, but there was still a bit left in the bottle. Not a whole bunch, maybe 3 ounces or 4 ounces left. And I would want to go to bed. And my feet felt as if they were planted in cement. And I would just be looking at this bottle going, I want to go to bed. I don't want to have another drink. And the little voice in the back of my head, devil on my shoulder, whatever you want to call it, was telling me, you're not done yet. You have to finish this. And I was outwardly, not inwardly, but just saying the words, I don't want to have another, as I'm pouring the drink. And then I'm looking at the shot in my shot glass going, I don't want to have this drink. And then as soon as I end up finishing the rest, all of a sudden, like, I felt defeated, but whatever it was inside me ended up saying, now you can go to bed. Now you can walk and go to sleep. So I already knew that there was a pretty big problem going on with me before we ended up living together. at first it became difficult, but then it became horribly easy with lying and coming up with excuses to get my drink. So I like to cook. It's one of the things that I pride myself on that I can do really well. So my kitchen, it has like that open section where you can see through to the living room. I have a couch kind of pushed up there. And so if she was sitting on there and I'm cooking in the kitchen, I can end up having my drinks because I have the skillets going and everything's making noise. So I can just go on ahead and just thunk, pop that thing off, pour two shots in my 1.5 ounce shot glasses, slam those back in about like 5 seconds between pop, pour, on, down. And I would end up having 6 of those, maybe 7 or 8.
In a cooking session?
Yeah, while I'm cooking. And then I still have some that's left, so I'd end up be able to go to the fridge because the motor in there whirs a little loud. So I'd be able to pop that off right there and then just shot, bam, throw it back real quick, no problem. I seemed like I was forgetful because I'd always end up saying, oh, there's something in my car that I need to go grab. Oh, I didn't grab my radio to charge it. Go out to the garage, pop a few back right there, come back in, go back out, going, my flashlight's in there. I need to go on ahead and charge that up also, slam a couple more back right there. But there's going to be that problem of the smell of alcohol. So what she ended up seeing routinely was 2 drinks that I would have. I'd end up pouring it into a glass over an ice ball. And I would end up sipping on that drink while I'm slamming back more. And then I'd end up pouring my second drink that she would see while I'm slamming back more.
And this is all bourbon?
Yeah.
Good God.
I ended up realizing, so that was a little bit of trial and error for myself also. I mean, I wanted something with a high enough alcohol content, but nothing that was going to really throw things out of whack, like 100 proof wild turkey or 100 proof vodka or that. Just that 45.7%. I've been able to get that time down, unfortunately. So I just ended up keeping to that same schedule. But when I ended up realizing how easy it was to just keep slamming them back without a thought or anybody really thinking or seeing or anything, I mean, at first it was like, oh, okay, this ain't a big thing. But I'm constantly lying, especially to somebody that I love, that on how much I'm drinking, I'm hiding it. If I ended up going out, I would always end up pre-gaming before. I never drove. Either I'd get driven to or Uber to everywhere I went, but I would end up pre-gaming before. So if one of my regular friends or coworkers ended up seeing me get way too drunk, it was so far and in between that it was just another thing that could just get chalked up to, oh, he just had a bit too much, as opposed to there's a major issue here.
That's a lot of calculations that you had to.
I don't know if we can release this episode.
Yeah,
he's going to give all these other people ideas on how to.
Gordon, you had it down to a science for your own functioning, yeah. And how exhausting was that to have basically a mental wrestling match every day, and make sure you stay to your own schedule and that you've calculated.
So at first it became a little bit difficult, but just routine and repetition. I mean, unfortunately, it became
survival.
Not just survival, it just became easy to do, where it became my normal. It wasn't weird or anything else like that. That was just daily life for me.
So the lying's normal at this point, but did you ever feel that it was wrong and you knew it and you were shoving that aside, or did it actually become normalized to the point that you were accepting it and totally fine with it?
No, I started trying to get good at lying to myself on trying to say that this is normal, this is fine, this is no big thing. Sure. But I knew deep down that this was a major issue. I had wrestled it with myself, and unfortunately it didn't actually come out on trying to get myself my own help. And I mean, when I ended up realizing it, I ended up having this little joke that I would end up saying to people if they end up seeing that I was drinking a little more than they would normally see me drink. And at first it was just a little joke, or like, I'm a borderline alcoholic. Oh, ha ha ha, no big thing. But at a certain point, I would start saying that, and all of a sudden I'm going, I'm not borderline. I know that there's a problem here. And then the biggest thing that stopped me every single time was the next morning. The next morning, after I'm feeling horrible, most of the time I'd end up throwing up at least once in the morning before getting my caffeine, headache medicine into me and all of that. But once it kicked in, all of a sudden, my mind is telling me, you're still here. You're feeling better. It wasn't that bad last night. So really, I'm playing against myself. And then finally, it's my addiction playing against me on making sure I keep doing this every single night.
It's like a demon.
Yeah.
You talked before about the effects of vomiting that frequently. Explain that again.
So I ended up having to look it up, and then I ended up confirming it with a doctor way later on. But I started getting a little bit worried when in the morning I would throw up, and just all of a sudden one morning it looked like I threw up black tar. And I remembered looking at it, and I'm like, what did I eat last night that could have caused this? Because most of the time I couldn't remember what I ended up cooking or eating or anything else like that. It wasn't until a little bit later on where it started to become more frequent that I looked it up, and then I ended up just throwing that away from my mind because I'm like, oh, I don't want to know that. But it got confirmed that it was a black tarry-like substance that you're throwing up is blood mixed with acid. So I was tearing my esophageal lining and my stomach lining just slightly, where I would have blood in my stomach, and when it would mix together, and that's the result you'd end up getting when you end up throwing it up.
You recognized that something was wrong, and did you know how to get help? Was it as from a department standpoint? Did you feel like at that point that there was something in place that you could,
or did you even feel like you needed help?
I did feel like I needed help, but I always threw that away. Because
did you think this was going to end eventually on its own, or you would just find a way through life in this?
I just assumed that I would be able to find my own way through life by just keeping, okay, this is working, what I'm doing. I'm not getting in trouble. I'm drinking home alone in the dark. I'm good this way as long as I have my alcohol and I can't drive, or not can't, but I don't let myself drive. As long as I'm 000'd out in the morning, I'm good for work. I can just keep the status quo, no problem whatsoever. But I honestly did not feel if I said anything to the department at that time that I would get help, that I would end up being demonized, damned, instead of a scarlet A, a scarlet D slapped onto my chest to walk around with as just being a disgrace.
and you get buried somewhere.
Yeah.
Within an apartment.
They would end up putting me somewhere where I can't see the general public or the light of day, most likely again, because
No more hot calls.
no more going to actually help people, which is the whole reason why we end up staying in this job.
So I want to segue into 2022. Coming off on the heels of two very respected veteran officers getting arrested for DWI. Chief Garcia basically, he said that something's got to change. We have to do something. We have to put something out there, extending an olive branch to try something different and something new. And I remember when Chief Ramirez came to us in the wellness unit, and he basically said, hey, this is going to happen. We are going to put out a policy, and it's going to be 30 days for inpatient treatment for our employees if they come forward prior to having an alcohol-related offense. When I first heard that, I thought, wow, I'm wondering if anybody's going to use this. Can you tell the listener what your reaction when you heard this announced?
So when I ended up actually reading it in the email, I was at home, and I remember reading it all the way through and then showing it to my fiance and saying, this is a crock of shit. This is just another way to try to get people out there to put them somewhere else. I had a heavy mistrust in the chain of command, internal affairs, just everything in general, just throughout the years, like a lot of other officers had. So my first reaction was, this is bullshit.
So you shared this with your fiance. So at the time,
Well,
did she know that you're dealing with this issue?
No, she still didn't know it yet. I just ended up just showing her because I'm like, look at this shit. This is just something else that's just going to try to bury some people or just ruin careers. This isn't going to be helpful.
I've heard that actually from a lot of different. I'm still hearing it, and there's a lot of people in our department. They're not aware that people have reached out about this, and
I would say most officers have no idea how many people have actually turned to the wellness unit right now for help, because they've hit that point that they're desperate and they'll take that chance.
Yeah. So whenever you heard this, you thought it was bullshit because I kind of was thinking, and I remember telling Lieutenant Rivera and Sergeant Figueroa when this first came out, I said, I believe if we have one person in a calendar year to go through this, I think we can look at this policy as a success, because it's a big deal for somebody to come forward. And it's a lot of courage to come out and say, first, I have a problem and I'm going to take a leap of faith in this department policy. Because, the policy is one thing, but there's still some fear of the ramifications after you go through it, right? What point did you get to where you decided to take that leap of faith? And can you tell the listener about the night you sat down with Megan and said, I have something we need to talk about?
Yeah, so I didn't really put this, the reason why I ended up coming forward, in my opinion, it was divine intervention or cosmic universe, whatever anybody wants to end up calling it. So she had started getting me to go back to church again over the last 3 months. We'd been together for a year and a half, engaged, and so I was like, all right, fine. We'll start going back to church again. Let's go to mine because it's just right up the road in Capel. So I knew better, being Catholic, than to accept the Eucharist because it's a sacred rite for us. And I mean, you got to be right with God before you end up taking it. And so I was never accepting it while going. And then just one Sunday, while we're in there, something inside me told me, okay, get your ass up. You're good. So I ended up and went and accepted it. And then just, here's the blasphemous part also. I was also slamming back 3 or 4 shots before going out the door because she would end up driving. So I'd just slam 3 or 4 back and then go to church because I had to start my day out somehow. So that night, everything's staying exactly the same as it had always been with my drinking. And I'm sitting in the recliner. She's right next to me on the couch. And I'm just sipping on my drink like normal. And then all of a sudden, I just, for nothing that I can describe, I ended up just setting my drink down, and I just planted my feet on the floor, leaned forward, and I went, we have something I need to talk about. And she ended up seeing that I wasn't smiling. I did not look happy. Disappointed, defeated would be a better way to describe how I looked. And so I just ended up laying everything on the table to her. And I mean, this has been going on before we even met. So she was blindsided. She had an idea that I drank a little bit more than I did, but absolutely not to the extent that I was drinking.
It's been going on for 6 years at this point.
So it had been going on for 6 years, but the fifth 5 days a week with the minimum 2 handles on the weekend was for the last 2 years. So the heaviest point that I was at was before we even met. So I blindsided cold cocked her with the information essentially. And we had a very, very long discussion about it. She ended up bringing up some point in the conversation or reminding me about the wellness unit and all of that. But the biggest thing was at the very end of this whole thing, she just looked at me and said, "Do you need help?" And I broke down. And when I've needed help for 6 years, much less the last 2 years. And she just went, "You're going to talk to your sergeant tomorrow morning." So next morning I wake up, I do my normal ritual, throw up, grab my Excedrin, get my caffeine in me. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. Okay. Wasn't that bad, just like normal. Just that little demon inside me just going like, see, you're fine. Everything's good. You're alive, and you're about to become awake from the caffeine. Well, she leaves for work about the same time I do right now. And so when we're both about to go out the door, she just ends up throwing to me again. She goes, "You're going to talk to your sergeant when you get to work." I'm like, God. And now I didn't even remember, but I had drunkenly texted my sergeant saying,
Nice.
After it was just real simple because, yeah, that's never good, especially when you're almost blacked out again. So I ended up texting her and went, "Hey, when detail's over, I need to have a closed door meeting with you," or something to that effect. And it was just okay. So I forget what we had going on, but we ended up having something where we all kind of left, and then I just ended up getting a hold of my sergeant again. I was like, "Hey, are you in your office? I really need to talk to you." So I go up and I meet with Sergeant Valentine, and I mean, you come into her office, she's chipper. She's just like, "Hey, so what's going on?" And then she sees me close the door behind me and just sit down. And
So real quick,
yeah.
what kind of officer are you to them? Like, are you the serious guy? Or are you someone who's kind of just disappears and does your work and doesn't say much? So for you to go in and close the door.
So I love to joke around, have fun. I also like when I go out, like when I focus in on something, I go at a full tilt. So I mean, basically, actually going to whatever it is that I'm being pointed at, it's just dead serious going at it. But outside of that, behind closed doors and that, I'm just laughing and joking and just trying to have fun and lighten the mood, because really inside I was just dying. I needed to, at the very least, not just like, I'll be honest, I didn't really care about making other people laugh or smile or that. I was just trying to make myself laugh, to make myself feel less shitty. So when I closed the door, and I'm not saying anything as I just go over and sit down at the chair, Sarge could tell that there was something going on, and I broke down in front of her because she knew me before I was in her unit, and I was just another regular patrol officer. She was on a different watch than me, but she had seen me just like go to calls. She would stay over to supervise a bit. She knew me, and I ended up just saying all of this, and I went, "I don't know who I need to reach out to. Please help me."
Are you able to say her name?
Yeah, Sergeant Valentine. The look on her face was something that it hurt, because I respect her just so highly. And I mean, yeah, it may not have been a huge lie, but it was just lying every single time, especially while in her unit of, "Yeah, I'm just tired. Yeah, it's too much caffeine. Yeah, it's this," when she's done nothing but just the best for me. So I ended up hitting her with this, and I'm not going to go into any detail on what she ended up talking about because it was personal, but she ended up getting to a level with me on being able to just the level of compassion, empathy, care that she ended up showing while I talked to her was just unbelievable. And then it just felt like the knife just being stabbed in deeper to me. I would have almost rather been just berated and belittled because I already felt down. But she ended up telling me, she was like, I'm going to get a hold of whoever it is. I will find out myself, and I will get a hold of you. And that was what ended up leading me to be able to talk to Joe. Got to come down, talk to him, talk to Sergeant Fig. And I mean, every single time I was talking about it, because I hated myself with the amount that I was drinking. I mean, I didn't realize it until I just went ahead and opened that floodgate. But every aspect of myself I didn't like because of the drinking. And even with Joe and Fig, and even when I ended up talking to the counselors to the rehab center for their pre-entry screening, I just broke down every time. And I don't break down. That's the thing. If I do, it's because my trainers end up telling me, okay, you can have a couple sniffles, stuff that shit down, go to the next call. So I just applied that to every aspect of my life in any way, shape, or form. But actually getting to talk to Joe and Sergeant Figueroa, that entire process getting there, it hurt. But I mean, the biggest thing so far I've realized is if it's uncomfortable and it hurts, then you're going on the right way. Because if it's not, then you're not being honest with yourself. You're not following through the way you should be.
Yeah, your sergeant, she reached out to me, and she just said that she had one of her troops that needed help. She never told me your name. She said, I'm going to give him your number, and he's going to call you. And I remember I was actually in another recording session, and I started getting a phone call from an odd number. And then it went to voicemail, and then you had text me, and you didn't say your name. You just said, hey, this Sergeant Valentine told me to call you. And I ended up calling you later that day, and we had a long conversation. And then I said, okay. And then I still did not know your name. So working under the veil of confidentiality is important for the success of this unit and this department when it comes to dealing with people that need help. When you came down to our office and rang that doorbell, that's the first time I had met you. I had seen you around, but it's the first time I had met you, and it's the first time that I knew exactly who you were. And Sergeant Figueroa and I came in here to sit with you again, and we sat here for almost 2 hours, kind of walking through the process of how the intake would look. And that's one important piece that this wellness unit tries to alleviate as much stress from the people that we're helping, like all the intake process, who to call, the insurance process, and we just try to walk people through this as best we can. And I remember us asking you, do you want us to drive you down there? And the facility's like 5 hours away. Or do you want your fiance to drive you? And you were very honest with us, and you told us you would rather us drive you. Can you tell the listener why?
So, I mean, it only took me a moment to think about it, but I mean, it was just everything going through my head all at once, and I realized if my fiance goes to drive me down, I mean, she told me that there wouldn't be a chance in hell, but I just thought that there'd be a chance, even a slight chance, to be able to convince her to turn that car around at a certain point. I ended up taking it. If I were to try to drive myself down, I knew that was not going to happen, because every day driving into work, that caffeine started kicking in, and all of a sudden I'm going, see, nothing's wrong with me, I'm good. Well, that would suck if on the way down to the center, all of a sudden I just get that, it overrides everything in me, and I turn around. So when I ended up asking you guys to drive me down, it was because I couldn't trust myself. I recognized in this aspect I was going to be completely untrustworthy to be able to have just the simple responsibility of point my car and drive.
You know what I hear in all this is actually accountability and ownership. So when you were telling the story about your fiance telling you you're going to go talk to your sergeant, and the next morning you get up and take the caffeine and you're feeling pretty good, I would expect that you talk to yourself out of it.
No, I did.
But you followed through. And you did. You followed through, and you went in the office, and not only that, but initially you couldn't meet with your sergeant, and so you tried again later, hey, do you have time? And then the fact that you knew that if your fiance were to drive you, that could be a problem as far as following through, and so you chose for Joe and Sergeant Fig to drive you. I actually hear a huge strength in the accountability and the ownership in that.
I mean, at that point where I was at, I had been lying to myself more than anybody else. That was the only reason I could end up just like keeping myself from just laying on the couch for like 3 weeks of depression worth of just self-loathing because of this. I had to lie to myself more than anybody else. So the only way that this was going to work was I needed to cut the shit out for myself. I needed to be honest, which was one of the first times that I'd been that honest with myself for accountability. I mean, that's the only way that if you're wanting to get help, that you can actually get help and have it work for you.
What was going through your mind during that drive, and then when you got to the gates of that facility?
So what ended up going through my mind in the very beginning was, fuck, I need a drink. Because when I got home the night before, I ended up realizing, okay, well, I didn't want to be wasteful and get a fifth because I knew I was going to have to wake up really early, and we're going to start driving down, or we're going to meet up here at about 4 a.m. and then just start heading down. So I ended up stopping off at the liquor store, and I picked up, instead of a fifth, I ended up picking up 8 of those mini bottles of 99 proof vodka. I got the flavored kind, and then I had my pre-workout in a shaker just so that like my fiance wouldn't smell it as much because it was flavored. It was 99 proof, and then I was masking it also with the smell of the pre-workout mix that I was drinking. Because I don't know why I was thinking that, but I was thinking that anyways. But I ended up killing all 8 of those shots in 30 to 45 minutes. It's not even 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'm going, oh crap, I'm not feeling it. Not even a buzz. I know I was over the limit, but I was at the point where I didn't feel it. And even after like another hour, 2 hours, still didn't feel it. And I realized this is going to suck. It's going to be a long ass day. So when we showed up, I was already starting to go through withdrawals. Because from the last time I actually had the normal amount to drink, it had been over 24 hours. And then also knowing where I was going just didn't help at all. So I started having some anxiety at that moment when I ended up seeing Sergeant Fig and Massey show up. So we get in the car. I could already start feeling a little bit of a tremor in my hand and all of that. So I'm just gripping my right hand with my left hand. I'm just staring down at the floorboard most of the time, or just out the window. I wasn't really being too conversational. I wanted to be, because I wanted to try to take my mind off of just what was going on with me. But as the trip kept going longer and longer down the road, both hands started shaking. My foot started like bouncing up and down, and then because when it wasn't, it was actually shaking as well. And my body started going into panic mode, because I wasn't drinking. I didn't have anything in my system compared to what I had the previous 2 years, the night before. And so everything was already getting thrown out of whack. When I showed up at a Hacienda, the rehab center, I was going through detox already, which they weren't super happy about. Turns out if it's alcohol, they want you driven there, so that you can end up having stuff in your system, so they can properly taper you down into detoxing. When I showed up, when I finally got into the special care unit, which is basically like the little emergency hospital inside the facility, which you have to go to each day for medication and whatnot, checkups, but they also have patient room beds in there. By the time I finished the initial check-in, and then Sergeant Fig and Massey drove off, and I go in there, my whole body was vibrating. And they were just asking me how much I had to drink and all of that, like on a regular basis. And they asked me how much I had and at what time. And I said it was 8 shots of about 100 proof vodka. And they go, "Oh, what time?" And I was like, around 8. They go, "It's 9:30." They go, "Oh, it's like an hour and a half ago?" And I went, "No, last night." They got a breathalyzer. They breathalyzed me. I'm 000'd out. All of a sudden, they're kind of going, "Oh, crap." They throw the blood pressure cuff on me, the heart monitor, everything. And I was 182 over 121 with a resting heart rate in the 120s. They started getting real worried real quick. I didn't realize this, but apparently it's more common to die from detoxing off of alcohol than anything else. I wasn't aware of that. So they immediately, right then and there, started me on Ativan to start trying to taper me down, trying to get me so I wouldn't have a seizure or to die or anything else along those lines right there in front of them.
Well, what did the doctors tell you?
So the second day that after your first night there, the second day they end up doing a blood draw so that you fasted the night before, and then they get 3 vials. They end up checking everything, your liver enzymes. My liver enzymes were 4 to 5 times what's supposed to be normal. From all the tests they ended up doing and the amount that I was drinking, it was probably going to be about a year to a year and a half before I would have been in liver failure, had cirrhosis, massive cirrhosis of the liver, and then probably another year to a year and a half before I would have been dead, because especially since they don't allow or don't do liver transplants to alcoholics, because it would just be a waste of a liver. So essentially I was going to die in 3 years.
So divine intervention is the interference of a deity in human life, almost miraculous in nature. So while you're in your 5th day, you said, and you get an emergency contact from the outside, can you tell a listener what happened and how all that played out?
Yeah, so it wasn't an emergency contact where I got called. I was calling. They had certain hours that the phones were available for use, and then you had to use a prepaid minutes card to be able to call to the outside. So every night that I was there, except for the first 3 nights because I was detoxing so hard, I would give my fiance a call. They kept me in the unit for 6 total days because they wanted, and that's a very uncomfortable experience because they hook you up to a portable, I think it's called an EKG monitor, just to check your heart rate and your whatever's going on with it, and then they end up waking you up 3 to 4 times a night to get your blood pressure and all that. So it's very uncomfortable, especially with every other aspect.
Just like a hospital. All right. And just wake you up and don't get any sleep.
That's why I don't go to hospitals. So I'm detoxing. I'm starting to get towards the tail end of it. And I call my fiance and we're talking on the phone, and then she kind of trails off and goes, "There is something you need to know." And I'm like, "Oh God." I was like, "What is it?" I left her at the house with 3 dogs and a cat and all of that. And I'm like, "Oh crap." I was like, "What? Did they take a shit on the rug?" She goes, "No." And I'm like, oh crap. That was a joke. And she didn't laugh even. My plumbing for both bathrooms with the old cast iron that was underneath the house broke. So both bathrooms were inoperable. And then she had just a plumber come out real quick to try to just keep it from flooding and all of that. And while he stopped all that, he ended up going, "It looks like the foundation's a little compromised also, possibly from this I'm on day 5 and I'm detoxing. I'm getting told all this shit is happening, and I pretty much freak the fuck out.
And you're many hours away from home.
I am 5 hours from home, and I'm going, how the hell can this be done? My actual house is literally falling apart right now while I'm here. There's nothing I can do. My insurance, it's only in my name and all of this. We're not married, none of that, so she can't get on it. She can't do this. She can't speak on my behalf. My initial reaction was to run out of there. I remembered when we were coming in, I happened to pull my head up. I knew where the Hunt store was, which is ironic. It's right down the road from a rehab center, and their primary sales are beer. So like I could go down there, and then I could end up just get an Uber or cab to go to the airport, which is a couple like 2 hours away, fly to DFW. I don't know how the hell I was going to do that. I didn't have my phone for an Uber, and I don't know the number to a taxi cab. So I didn't know what to do, so I ended up just like remembered that my weekend counselor, because I got told this on Friday, and the weekend there is considered Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for in terms of counselors. And I went to talk to her, and she talked me down. So I got told the following day, we're allowed our cell phones for 45 minutes once a week. It could be since COVID, and that's how you can do FaceTime to be able to see your loved ones, since they are barred from being able to come in on the weekends. I was allowed to get my phone about an hour and a half ahead of that time so I could start making calls to my insurance. And this is where the bit of divine intervention came in. I called my insurance company, went through a lot of different busy signals to finally get put through to an actual person to talk to. And I ended up just, I was like, I can't lie. I have to throw all my cards on the table because I have nothing at this point. What's it going to hurt? So I ended up telling her that I was on the phone with everything that was going on. And then I said, and here's the thing, I am 5 hours away from my house. I am in Hunt, Texas. It is a rehabilitation center. I don't know what to do. My fiance's there, and she's not on my insurance. There was dead silence on the phone. And then I got asked by the woman I was talking to, which day are you on? It was technically day 6, but I told her I went day 5. Why? Because in my head, I'm like, who the fuck asks that kind of question after you end up saying you're in rehab? Her response was, I went through rehab myself last year. Keep it up. Hold on. Let me see what I could do. And I don't know if she ended up getting allowed to do this or she ended up managing to do it on her own under the radar. But she managed to put my fiance, who isn't a spouse or anything like that, as somebody that could end up speaking on my behalf while I'm here for my insurance. And that just absolutely floored me because I was just another aspect of just letting go, and that God essentially, I mean, I know some people listen to this might end up saying, oh, it's about God. Well, it is on this one. And this was just another aspect of God working in a way that you wouldn't think that something happening should have happened. I mean, just because we're on the divine intervention, I mean, there couldn't have been just everything that happened to me up to this point could not have been laid out in any more of a way. We ended up getting Chief Garcia as our chief, somebody who cares about the troops, somebody who ended up looking at a problem, said, I need something created. So everybody sat down, penciled something in, came up with the wellness unit. He ended up having it implemented. Once it was implemented, he went on ahead and ended up putting out the 30-day inpatient allowance for administrative leave. He ended up having the Place Network investigation program put into place. If he hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have been able to get selected like I did, to where I ended up having Sergeant Valentine as my sergeant, somebody who had more compassion than I think a lot of other sergeants. Not that it's just because, not saying sergeants wouldn't care. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh shit, what the hell am I being told? This is some massive shit. I don't know how others would have reacted, but I know how Valentine ended up acting, and then ended up getting me in touch with everybody else after God saw all these dominoes up and looked at me sitting on the couch and just went, yeah, let's go on ahead and kick this domino over and get this party started. So, I mean, in terms of divine intervention, there's been quite a little bit going on to get me here today.
That's remarkable. And there's going to be more. There's going to be more to come, as this is the beginning of a journey, right?
Yeah.
Before off air, we were talking about it. Your body's going through the massive withdrawals, and part of the withdrawals comes to hallucinations.
Yeah.
Right, and those are real. And you had an odd, frightening hallucination you're kind of talking about. Can you talk about that a little bit to the listener?
So it was more unnerving than anything else, and I'm glad for one of the guys in my unit. He was a corpsman, so he ended up telling me, because I came clean with my unit. It's one thing to be gone for a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's considered vacation. But when you're gone for over that, it's like, did he get fired or where'd he go? And I knew that Valentine would not say my name, and it would just be one of these, and then more people are going to be asking questions. So I told them. And so I got...
How did you tell them? You texted everyone or emailed or sat everyone in the room?
So what I did with that was I texted my sergeant and said, this is something I need to do since it's just 6 of us in this unit. After detail, I need to tell everyone. So after we finished our regular detail, she led us down to a little conference room and had the door closed. And then everybody's looking at her, and she goes, this isn't mine, this is Fulton's. So I ended up telling everybody just point blank what was going on with me. And they ended up realizing, especially when I ended up starting saying that if we went out to lunch, it was always seen if it had a fork where my hand was shaking. So telling them was incredibly rough on that part. I ended up riding with this one guy in my unit routinely, and he was a corpsman in the Army. And he ended up talking to me about the DTs and whatnot, and what I could expect in some way, shape, or form.
What are the DTs?
I do not know what the DT stands for, but essentially it is going through hell while going through detox and withdrawals. They said the name once, and then I just went on ahead and was like, yeah, I'll forget that now, I guess. I don't know why, but it's just DT was a lot easier to remember than whatever it was called. So one of the things, it's not common, but having hallucinations, and I got lucky in the sense that I only had it for a short while on my first night. So I was in the special care unit, and the most that they'll have in a room is 2 people, one on each side of the room, like patients, and most people it's just for a night and then they get kicked out. I had a guy in there, another law enforcement from somewhere else in the country. So lights out, and then I just look over to my right, and underneath his bed, I end up seeing this demon-looking, just fucking dude just staring at me with big-ass teeth, and I just looked at it, and then I just rolled back over, looked at the ceiling, and I was like, well, at least my partner told me this shit would fucking happen. Just snapped my eyes closed, and was like, fuck, I need to go to sleep so bad right now.
Wow. So I want to get into when you got through the 30 days, and I remember Sergeant Fig telling the group, said, hey, we're going to go pick him up. They went and picked you up on a Thursday of that week, not that long ago. And that Friday morning, you stopped in the office because you had to drop off some paperwork that you had from there. And that morning, it was pretty early, and it was a Friday, and there wasn't anybody here except me. And you came in, and it's the first time I had seen you since you left. And you had a different look in your face. You had more color. Your eyes. You looked so much happier and full of life. And you were telling me about the process and about how grateful you were for everything and how much it's life changing. And you told me literally 3 times, "Please tell Chief Garcia he saved my life." And I kind of looked at the time, and it was getting to the end of Comstat that day. Comstat's usually on Mondays and Fridays. And I said, well, let me go see if he's up there. So I went up there, and I slipped in, and, all the chiefs are there, 3 and then 2 stars and Garcia and all the other commanders. And I did this for a lot of reasons. I wanted him to hear it. I wanted everybody else to hear it too, of how important it was and what, if they were even on the fence that this is not a thing in our department and these kind of struggles, I wanted them to hear it. And I told Chief Garcia, and I saw a reaction. He came up to me after the meeting, and he talked about it again, and there was a reaction. Then a few days later, he reached out and he said, "Hey, if it's possible, can I meet this man? If he knew it's all confidential. He wanted me to ask you if he could meet." And I reached out to you, and you said absolutely. Can you talk about that meeting with Chief? What that meant to you?
Yeah. So when you first told me, I was just kind of staring at my phone that the chief wanted to meet with me. I mean, outside of disciplinary hearings or something like that, I don't really know of a chief that specifically said he wanted to speak with a troop. So I was a little floored by that, and then I was a bit apprehensive about it. I wanted to meet the chief. I wanted to tell him, but also I really didn't want to go up there because for the entire time that I've been here, my main purpose that I've enjoyed is going out, helping the citizens of Dallas as a guardian, as a protector, doing what I can, then going home, just being faceless, nameless, it was the Dallas Police Department, not this individual. So I knew that by meeting with the chief, that was going to change that quite a little bit. Mainly because the 4-star would have actually known who I was. So in my final days at rehab, I had gone on ahead and realized what had been given to me as a second chance. So I ended up telling myself and telling God that if there's something I can do to help out another officer on this department in some way, shape, or form, or some other alcoholic in the dark across the country in some way, shape, or form, I was going to do it. Now that I was not expecting any of this before I got my 60-day sober chip, but I ended up answering back to you that, yes, I would end up meeting with him. So...
Had you met the chief prior to that?
I had never met the chief. Well, let me take that back. I met the chief once, and it was to shake his hand and get my senior corporal badge when I promoted.
Okay.
Outside of that, never met him, never talked to him. Occasionally saw him on a broadcast because I don't watch the news, but it pops up every now and then on Facebook or Instagram or something else like that. So we ended up getting the date and time set, and I ended up going up to meet with him. And the biggest thing I wanted to get across, outside of just my absolute gratitude to this man for recognizing something wrong going on internally with the department that no one is seeing in another person, because I always thought somebody saw something like outwardly wrong with me while I was at work, but to actually get told by my sergeant, my coworkers, that they saw nothing in terms of that would scream help. I knew that I needed to meet with the chief more so than thanking him for my life and my career, that this program needs to stay in place here. Because if it ends up just helping one other officer in this department alone to come forward and say, I need help, and this is still here, and if it happens to be because of something I said, then that's the biggest thing I could possibly do. If it's just one person, that's the biggest thing I can do to give back and to help in some way, shape, or form with what has been given back to me.
We're in the business of saving lives, right? And if your words can save just another peer, that would mean a lot to you.
It would mean more than anything that I've had, have, or could eventually ever have. Because I know where I was at. I mean, it was never, anything where it would have been like feeling suicidal or anything like that, but just the absolute distaste I had for myself of where I was at, and just not being able to tell anybody. Because once you get that genie out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in there. So, yeah.
You gave Chief Garcia a gift.
I did.
Can you tell the listener what that was?
So, while I was at rehab, one of the things that they ended up having going on was an activities therapy. Basically, it's something it's something to do there, but it's really to be able to take home with you in terms of another skill or something that could end up distracting you in some way, shape, or form if you end up feeling like you need to end up drinking or just any of that. So what I ended up finally making, or falling in line with rather, was making the paracord bracelets. I was absolutely horrible at making those in the beginning. Like I kept wanting it's going to stay at my house just because of how bad it is. But I ended up getting it down, and basically it's all about having a certain length, being able to measure it, pain in the ass of keeping that measurement, while tying in the different braid onto it. It occupied my mind, it occupied my hands, and I realized this is something I can take home with me. But while I was there, I only ended up making 4 successfully at the end, and I mean they ended up coming out. They were the cord color that really was left, because most of them were all cut up or chopped up and not long enough. It was a bit of black and blue, so I ended up making 4 of those. And when I went to Chief Garcia, at the end of the meeting, I ended up giving him one. And I mean, it may sound a little bit corny or anything else like that, but I told him that this was a little bit of a representation of my life that I'm giving to him. I ended up talking a little bit more about it because it's so around my neck, I know they can't see it, I have a little medallion thing, and it can get popped out and whatnot. But what I end up having around my neck right now, it's my 30-day chip that I ended up getting. And I told Chief Garcia, because one of the things there is, like, when you get to leave, or when you're the day before you leave, you get to talk to the whole community just about what you experienced or anything else like that. And I told the community that when I came in, I was terrified also, because I was going to be a cop amongst addicts. I don't know. I ended up getting to meet a lot of guys that, like, they had done nickels and dimes in prison and whatnot, and they ended up telling me that I ended up changing their perspective on some officers. And I realized there that no one's a cop, no one's a felon, everyone's just an addict in some way, shape, or form. So when I was talking to them, one of the things I ended up telling them was I ended up pulling my 30-day chip out that they gave me that day, since I was going to be leaving the following day, which was my 30th day. And I told them, and I still hold this true, that this 30-day chip, I hold it as high of regards as my PO badge that I got when I got out of the academy, and the same height that I hold my corporal badge that I currently have. It's just a piece of tin, just a piece of metal with some other aspect put onto it. In terms of monetary value, it's not that much. But the biggest thing is what's behind it. I mean, my PO badge, I bled and sweat and cried and got injured a couple of times with that. It's all tarnished and chipped. The corporal badge, it's fading a little bit. It's been out in the weather a little now. But it has the training of some of these rookies that I've gotten to have that symbolize behind that also. And the chip, it ends up holding the meaning because it was my restart, essentially like my rebirth. I mean, after 6 years of the same thing again and again and again, and now I've changed it. I hold it to just as much as significance as my badges. And after I had told Garcia that, I ended up giving him one of the paracord bracelets. And I went, it's the exact same as my badges and as the chip I have. Monetarily, it's worth nothing. But it's a representation of the life that he ended up re-giving me for a second chance, literally and figuratively. Because, I mean, figuratively, yeah, there was only 3 ways that this was going to end for me if I kept going down the same path. It was going to end in my arrest, my serious bodily injury or death, or the serious injury and bodily death of another person. Those are the only 3 routes that I was going to be going towards if I kept on what I was doing. And in terms of my death, it could have been I ended up finally slipping up from that razor's edge and drove. And crashed my car. It could have been that within the next 3 years, I would have died from medical complications in some way, shape, or form from my drinking. So when I gave that to Garcia, I legitimately meant that as it's a representation of my life. And, I mean, he could keep it on him, keep it on his desk, put it wherever. But that's what I ended up telling him there at the end of that meeting with the bracelet that I ended up giving him.
Well, I can tell you he was floored by it, and still is. He actually tweeted out a picture of it afterwards, and he said he's been given a lot of gifts in his career, and he said this one really got him. So it really touched him because he understands the symbolism of it. Having a policy in place is one thing, but actually having a true success story and a true testimonial is especially early on in any policy or any program, it says a lot. And this policy is, gosh, it's not even 3 months, maybe a little over 3 months since it's been implemented, and we're still figuring things out, as are you. You broke your own personal status quo. What would you say to the many peers that are out there struggling, if they're on the fence about getting help or reaching out within the department to get help? What would you tell them?
I would end up telling them that it's not easy, that the mistrust that you might feel towards looking at the policy or anybody else that might end up seeing your name or hearing of through whispers or conversations possibly because you ended up admitting to it shouldn't matter. That was the hardest thing, which I honestly would not have, and I hadn't gotten over when I ended up reaching out to my sergeant. I got help by actually reaching out to my fiance, and sometimes that might be the biggest thing for most people because I had zero desire to come forward whatsoever. I had everything set. It was in place. It was working for me as long as I kept the lie up that it was fine. If you're not going to end up reaching out then like that, then you need to reach out in a way that I did, which was I ended up talking to someone that I care about and someone that loves me, and had a very, very difficult conversation, because that started just peeling the layers off of my eyes that I was looking through, to finally recognize I'm full of shit towards myself, that what I'm doing is killing me, and it's going to affect my career if it has not already in some way, shape, or form that I haven't even recognized.
This getting help was self-initiated by you. Now, obviously, you were influenced by the Spirit or God working in your life. So as a follow-up to this question, if those out there are not going to actively seek help or self-initiate it, is there anything that can be said or done for them to push them over the edge to start working on ownership of it and getting help?
So the biggest thing I would end up saying, just from my own experience, is you need to start not just looking at your own health and physical fitness. You need to look at your spiritual fitness, because I was able to trace all the way back to like when I started drinking more than normal, which was just like a social or normal drinker amount, all the way back to 7/7, not because of the traumatic event in terms of what I saw and felt emotionally, but because of my complete abandonment of faith on that day, is where I ended up being able to draw the line back to. Now, maybe for some people, not so much, but for me, if somebody is wanting to start getting help but not just outwardly say it to the department, I would end up saying, you need to take a look at your spiritual fitness. Where are you at on there? If you believe, then where are you at on there? If you don't, I mean, I wish I could have ended up talking to another individual a little bit more on his belief, because I'd been able to talk more, because one of the aspects is of the program that I got put into, it's a spiritual program a bit. Or that's where it's based out of. But he was a complete and total atheist. So, like a staunch atheist. And I never got to, like, by the time he couldn't wrap his mind around the God concept or context. And that actually hurt him while he was in rehab for about a week and a half. But I wish, and I need to talk to him on what it is exactly he did, because he was able to work around that for himself, because usually that's what it is. If it's just science or God, whatever your higher power is, you need to start looking at your fitness on there first, work towards that, and then slowly develop it on, okay, how is this going to work? I know for myself, if I had done that, it probably would have just ended back to where I was, just strictly on that basis, because I probably would have done some kind of outpatient program and then been drinking on the weekends outside of it. But no, that's where I would end up telling somebody to start if they're not wanting to just come forward to their department.
Thanks. That's a great answer.
You got back to work. You're back on the streets, putting bad guys in jail, right? You're out serving the citizens, right? You didn't get buried somewhere, right?
So less than let's see, what time did we get back? We got back at like around 6 or 7 in the evening. Less than 16 hours later, I was back at work, and I was serving a warrant.
Wow.
With my unit.
Wow.
Gord, you have a very promising future, not only personally but professionally. You have a new fiance. I look forward to getting an invite to that wedding.
You will.
For departmentally, you are very close to taking the next step in your evolution as a Dallas police officer. Is that correct? Can you tell the listeners what's on the horizon for you?
So what's on the horizon for me is one of the things that I was using as an anchor to keep me from coming forward originally. last year I ended up taking this year rather, beginning of this year, I ended up taking the sergeant's promotional test, and through the rounds of promotions, I'm 26 away from getting promoted on this department. And that was something else I was originally using to hold myself back, because I'm like, again, having that Scarlet D thrown onto me to be buried, that's going to get stripped away because it's going to be seen as a lack of being able to be a leader. In my mind, I was thinking, but one of the things I ended up getting told by primarily you, Joe, was that from Chief Garcia, that this is not going to have any kind of impact, shape, or form on my ability to promote.
No, it's not going to have any impact on your ability to promote nor apply for positions. And that's written into the policy, and that's the message that we want to get out there to the troops and the people that are struggling.
So, Gordon, one of our issues with the department, our current culture, is that we always say to stay quiet about our issues and to pack it away. It needs to be more common and more accepted to recognize that we do have issues, because just not admitting that we have an issue doesn't mean that we don't have it. I think it's huge. Number one, your self-recognition, your self-awareness. You know, you've beaten yourself up a little bit about the things that you did, but the fact that you recognize what you did is enormous, and I don't know that you give yourself enough credit for that. Your courage to stand in front of this group, period, and a group of microphones, and tell everybody what you went through and how you felt about it is even more remarkable, I believe. And it's needed to get our department to start looking at, it's okay to say that you're not where you want to be, you know, and it's gigantic for someone to come forward, especially, like I said, or Joe said earlier, if we have one person in a calendar year that uses this, I'd say it's already a success. Like one person, you know, we say it all the time, if it affects one person. So if they decide tomorrow that there's no funding for the officer wellness group, or they just don't believe that it's working or whatever, we can hang our hats saying that we walk away as winners right now because of what you did by admitting that you need to do something and your recognition of that. So I want to commend you for that.
Gordon, I can't thank you enough for having the strength to, for one, make that call after Sergeant Valentine spoke with you, and then coming down here and meeting, and then laying out a plan, because it wasn't immediate. You waited a week. You suffered a week before you actually went on that trek for 5 hours. You had a lot of opportunity to back out and to change your mind, or just ghost us. You know, I was actually really concerned with that, but you didn't. You showed up. You went down there. You took care of yourself. You did the right thing, and now your mission and your new why is to help your peers out to come forward that may be struggling. There are people out there struggling.
I know that there are, because like I had said, one of the things that scared me the most that I got told after I came back was when I talked to my sergeant, and she had seen me throughout the years and all the way up to this point where I was this far gone. She told me that she had no indication that I was going through what I was going through, and that I was doing what I was doing. And not only did it scare me a little bit that I was able to hide it that well, but one of the things that I've been thinking about was, okay, if I'm able to hide it like this, how many others are in the exact same boat that are just holding it back? As far as what you were saying with being able to come forward, a little bit I had to, I was being a bit of a hypocrite up to that point also. Because, yeah, I got trained by some older heads that it was just stuff that shit down, call it a night, wake up, go to the next call, have a good morning, just don't talk about it. Two of my rookies, Cardenas, who ended up recently, he went over to Chicago PD because that was his dream place to go. So I didn't hold anything against him for that. And then there's another officer. I'm not going to say her name because I don't know if she wants to, but I mean, fantastic rookie, smart as a whip, can handle her own. There's a little bit of an issue on the Department of War from what I ended up hearing from one of your other podcasts about overexposing somebody. I believe that's true unless it's handled in a certain way, which is what I was trying to do with them. If it was a dead body call or a fatal car accident, yeah, I was one of those that ended up saying, let me get that call for training. Because it is something that needs to be exposed to. The difference that I did that made me an absolute hypocrite while I was with them was after we finished up what we were doing, I sat them down. I don't even have these numbers anymore, but I never used them. There were some psychological services. Those were the only numbers I knew. I didn't know about really the ATO or any possible outside help. I just had the primary ones. And I talked to them about what they were feeling, what they saw. How is this affecting you? And I knew what the answer was going to be, whether it was truthful or not. I was like, no, I'm fine. Everything's good and all that, which I know is not true in some way because I wasn't. After Paul Miltenberger's death, I carried that one around forever. I gave them the numbers. I told them these are numbers to call. These are numbers to individuals to reach out to. If you need to talk about it, talk to me about it. Meanwhile, I was not talking to anybody myself. But yeah, I just wanted to follow up with that part because it was something I recognized when I before I ended up going to the rehab center, rather. I mean, not even while I was talking to you guys initially. That no, if I'm going to be promoting this, that people need to get out and talk. I need to be able to get out and talk. This whole stuff it down isn't going to work. It's going to lead to where I got to, which was I have no alcoholics in my family, by the way, not a single one. But you can end up becoming one if you cross that line where your mind you have changed your brain chemistry, where now it relies on it. I'm not going to be able to drink again. If I do, it's progressive. The best way it was shown to me is it's basically on an upward chart on your ability for tolerance. As soon as you cut it off for being sober, it doesn't mean that when you restart, you start at the bottom again to keep going up. It's still a progressive illness. So say you stop for 30 days, that line still keeps going up invisibly, but it's there. So when you restart, you may start initially, okay, it's just a beer, 2 beers. But very quickly, you're no longer going to be at this old normal that you were at. You're going to start way up higher because it just kept progressing. So yeah, that just falls into you need to reach out and talk to somebody and not be holding and hoarding in all this crap that you see.
Again, that's another thing, though. Your experiences of what you've gone through are definitely going to help you in your ability, not just in this job, but in life. You know, it's a burden now that you have to carry, because if you see it in other people, it's your job to step forward now and say, hey, I've been there too. Yeah. You know, and you get to share that experience with other people.
And I mean, I wouldn't consider it a burden at this point. I mean, it's a responsibility, but it's not where it's going to be impacting my life in a negative way, because I know where I was at, I know where I was headed, and I mean, if somebody ends up reaching out for help or has questions, I'm going to be there, because I ended up having people there that I didn't recognize fully. I had driven people away, and I mean, there's this one girl. She's essentially like a little sister to me. She's been that way for years. And I did. I had to make amends to her because I was never a physical angry drunk. I was either just happy or I was emotionally hurtful. I knew, and I was just always able to just, for anybody, find that one little thread and just rip it out of them. And I did that to this one person, but she stood up when I ended up reaching out to her and 3 additional people for help while I was going to be gone to help out my fiance in some way, shape, or form, whether it be the dogs or this or that. So because I had these people that were able to help me, it's not a burden to be able to have somebody else that's I'm seeing or they reach out to me.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank Sergeant Wolverton sitting in. Danny, thank you as always, getting your hands on all these. I look forward to seeing your next step as a leader, because I think you're going to take what you learned from this entire experience and you're going to apply that to your leadership style and help others and guide other young officers and even older officers. I think they can learn a lot from you, and I think people across the country are going to be inspired by this story. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to give a message to other departments out there. If you have employees that are struggling, you have people that are hiding in the shadows that are dealing with the same issues, or they're not dealing with the same issues as well. Build something for them. They will come. It could save a life.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.